gentlemen, you are very welcome to Writer's Block Memoirs. My name is Miriam O'Gara Kilmurry, and today I have with me William Keck. He is absolutely amazing. He is a producer, he is a journalist. He started off as a tabloid journalist. You and I, over here in Europe, will recognize him from Hallmark, from the Discovery Channel, from his roundtable cast reunions where he has moderated an immense amount of work, and he has put it all together in this stunning book. It is called When You Step Upon a Star, and I am so delighted to have William Keck with me today. Welcome to the show.
Miriam, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and grateful to speak with you today. Thank you.
You are more than welcome. What a stunning piece of work. How long did it take you to write this wonderful memoir?
Well, it's based on over 30 years of stories, but I probably started writing about 15 years ago. But it was very different then as to what it evolved into. So I'd say seriously, since the pandemic is when I really got into all the notebooks and photos and recordings and just relived it all.
I can well imagine. And this beautiful design of all the chapters, that's really something that I found it very wonderful, because you can connect your tabloid past to the way you've designed and presented each chapter, which I thought was really wonderful. And you've got your what questions, your what, when, where, and the lesson learned at the end, with a really lovely photograph, and it just sets up each story. Some of the stories can be rather uncomfortable. Sometimes you're telling stories that are very humbling. You're maybe not showing the best side of yourself, and sometimes it can be a little bit shocking. But you set it all up in such a way that it's easy for the reader to grapple with what you're trying to put across. It's beautifully done.
I wanted this to be something that people could read if they've heard of the celebrities or if they haven't. Growing up, I wanted to meet the celebrities that I grew up watching on television. And I met almost all of them, not in the way I expected. So you got to be careful what you wish for. So I met them, but I met them by looking through their garbage, sneaking into their hospital rooms, sneaking into their weddings. It was fascinating.
You were clear from the beginning that you had a couple of very dominant bosses. You talk about Brian Williams. And I know you mentioned at one stage he was sending you like gladiators into the lion's den.
Yeah, you would never know how your morning would begin. When that phone rang at 6 a.m., you knew it was not going to be a good day, because it probably meant that somebody died or that somebody was on vacation and we were going to be sent to ruin their vacation. The one with Brian Williams that really kicks off the book is one of the most unsettling. And it's when I received a call to go track down the liver donor of Larry Hagman, who played J.R. Ewing on Dallas. Yeah.
That was an incredible story to read. That was just extraordinary. And also not just your meeting Larry Hagman and his own behaviors, but to also find the nonchalant way he kind of dealt with having received this liver. And your heart broke for the parents in some respects. It must have been quite an experience to meet him and see that, unfold in front of you.
Well, I grew up idolizing these people. I never missed Dallas. And to be sent to go find the secret donor, the family of the person who donated their liver so that Larry could survive, was really confronting, because I loved Larry Hagman. It's not supposed to be revealed who the liver donors are. We found out who it was. And so I went up to Northern California, knocked on the door of the address I'd been given. A woman answered the door. And I said, "I'm so sorry to disturb your day. I'm with the National Enquirer. And I believe that your late partner, Bill, was an organ donor." And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I have some news that that could possibly change your life. And she's like, what? I said, well, Bill's liver ended up in a very famous person. And she was like, who? And I said, well, have you seen Dallas? And that's all I needed to say. And she said, I had a feeling when I heard that Larry Hagman received a new liver, I thought that was probably where Bill's liver went. Oh, hmm.
What a thing. And you end up being a player in the whole scenario by actually having to be contacted by your company and say, please go and talk to this woman. You become an actor in the situation in your own way. It's just an incredible story.
Well,
But you
Larry Hagman
mentioned,
ended up writing, yeah. I was going to say Larry Hagman ended up writing in his book that he received a photograph of his liver donor thanks to the National Enquirer. So I've been mentioned in a few people's books. Also, Kelsey Grammer,
yes,
who we know as Fraser. He wrote about me in his book and called me, I'm sorry, a despicable piece of flesh who invited to burn in hell. But it was all a terrible
it's all
misunderstanding.
a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. And this is the thing, when we're reading the book, you've got all these people who are saying, all these awful things, and they're doubling back on their words as they go along when they finally get to know you. And there's this sense as we read it from the very beginning, that he's not actually a bad boy. He's actually a really good boy doing these jobs that he's done so well at other people's behests. But what was it that actually gave you that spark to go into this line of work? What was the actual trigger?
Well, I had started out working as NBC Page, and I worked for Aaron Spelling Productions, the person who created Dynasty and Love Boat.
Yeah.
And I was on that path. I was really kind of traumatized when Lucille Ball died. I loved Lucy, like
Yes.
so many of us did. And when
Yes.
she died in 1989, I sort of went into panic that I'm not going to get to meet all of my favorite stars. They're like an endangered species. So the
Yes.
Enquirer offered me an opportunity to meet all of these legends before they passed. And I kind of put the screenwriting aspirations aside and jumped into this crazy world. And I got to meet the Brady Bunch and Jimmy Stewart, Elizabeth Taylor, all the way through more current people like Michael Jackson and Britney Spears and Drew Barrymore.
Quite a thing. Quite a thing. And how do you feel? I mean, I can tell from speaking with you now that you can win people over very, very easily. Did you always have that gift?
I got to say that when I joined the Enquirer, the typical Enquirer reporter could be a Brit, could be somebody maybe who was kind of gruffy and a little confrontational. And I was kind of this apple pie, all-American kid knocking on people's doors, and it really threw them. They didn't expect that a National Enquirer reporter would look like I do in my 20s.
No.
Keep in mind, this is a long time ago. And I think that really helped me get away with a lot more. I think some people felt sorry for me that I was being sent in the lion's den. Some people could see that I was a nice guy, just having to ask some very uncomfortable questions. And it got me far. One of the stories I talk about, Miriam, in the book is when I was sent to interview the family of Nicole Brown Simpson,
Yes. Yes.
days after O.J. Simpson, well, murdered her. I'm going to say it. He murdered
Yeah.
her. And I did not think I would be able to get into the complex. It was gated. They were on guard. I tried flower deliveries. I tried grocery deliveries. Ultimately, I parked my car at a hotel. I jumped a fence, went down onto the beach, jumped another wall, and I ended up at the front door. And I knocked on the door, and the housekeeper answered and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "I'm here to see Mrs. Brown." And she said, "Come right this way." And so I was escorted into this room, and there was Nicole's three sisters and mother sitting around a table with a photograph of her in tears, as you can imagine. And Mrs.
Yes.
Brown, Nicole's mother, took my hand and said, "Thank you for coming. How did you know my Nicole?" Oh, oh, my heart was beating. There were lots of options at that point. I decided to tell the truth. I wanted to be honest, even though my means of getting there was pretty reprehensible. At that point, I was in their home, and I wanted a chance to have an on-the-record story. So I said, "I'm so sorry for this invasion. I'm with the National Enquirer." And she said, "Well, what do you want? And I never thought I'd even be asked that question. I think I asked the right question. I said, how did you tell the grandchildren that their mother was gone? And she ended up kind of relaxing her body, and she told me a beautiful story about how they told the children that mommy's gone, but now you have four mommies, and we're going to look after you. And then she proceeded to talk about OJ a bit. But that established a relationship with the Enquirer. It sounds horrible, and it was a horrible invasion, but they were looking for a mouthpiece to tell their stories, to tell Nicole's story, to reveal the things that she only told them. And the Enquirer became that mouthpiece for them for several years.
Yes. Yeah. And that is something that reoccurs in the book, that you actually build relationships. It's a very unusual situation, this, to actually to start off on a bad note and then build a relationship and be responsible for that, and actually have that happen. It is so rare to see it happen. But also, I think that story, as you tell it, again, Brian Williams is putting a lot of pressure on you, because you're
Yes.
saying, this is not going to happen. I can't, we can, and he keeps saying, I know you can do it. You've got this. You can push forward. You could, I mean, when you're very young, you listen to that kind of thing, don't you? And you push yourself to please.
You know, it was almost like joining a cult, or the
Yes,
mafia, right? And they say, you can do this. And then bad behavior was rewarded with
yes,
praise and a higher salary. The
yeah,
more scoop that I got, the higher my salary would raise. And in my early 20s, I was making more than my friends. And it was really very tempting and seductive.
very seductive, extremely
Yes.
so. And one of the other things that you broach from very early on, you talk about, and you put the word out there immediately, death, death. And you talk about, and I say this with respect, of course, the passing of your father so young, and how you were basically kept out of the picture, which would be quite difficult for us Irish people to understand, because we bring the kids in on all of the wakes. And when someone passes, a grandparent passes, or something similar to that, usually they lie in the house, and there's a candle lit, and there's always
Oh,
someone with them, and the
wow.
children embrace. In Ireland, there's a great embracing of death.
Mhm.
You had the complete polar opposite experience, which must have been quite shocking for you, really, William.
Well, it was a decision that was made by my family. I was 5 years old when my father died, and I guess they thought it would just be too traumatic for me to go to the wake, see the body, attend the funeral. And it was a decision that probably helped me in the immediate, but it also, in a 5 year old's mind, I was confused. My father was just gone. So I
Yes,
wondered, is he really alive? I mean, some of these storylines I would see on TV about people faking their deaths, I had these
yes,
kind of fantasies of digging up the grave and seeing if he was really in there. And then what this did to me was I sort of developed surrogate fathers. So the fathers I saw on television became my dads. Mike Brady from the Brady Bunch, Andy Griffith from the Andy
yes.
Griffith Show. These became my dads, and I went to Hollywood to meet them.
Yeah. And you tell that story very well. And in some ways you circle back to it as well, because you're not afraid to go to funerals. Your
Oh,
bosses keep saying, crash that funeral, and you do
yeah,
it.
yeah. And even I want to say that the Enquirer was 3 years of my life, and then I went on to become a respectable
A
journalist,
respectable
as you said.
journalist.
Yes, for USA Today, Los Angeles
USA
Times,
Today.
People Magazine, Entertainment Weekly, and it was still happening. I remember one time my editor from USA Today called and she said, "Are you a fan of the Golden Girls?" And I said, "Oh, yes." I was so excited to get to interview B. Arthur and Betty White. And so she said, "Great, start writing their obituaries." So we would write obituaries in advance, and so it seemed like I never could quite escape death. Even after I left the Enquirer, where I was sent to the funerals and the hospital rooms, death was still sort of circling over with me. I think that's because I made it very clear that I wanted to meet these older legends before they died. So
Yes.
again, Miriam, be careful what you wish for.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, it's the sort of thing they do with royalty. They write the obituaries for kings and queens well in advance. You were dealing with Hollywood royalty. It was very similar situation. I had a Victorian tea rooms in one of one of Ireland's most famous cemeteries up to 2015. I had it for about 2 years, and we had a lot of celebrity funerals. It was mainly the arts cemetery, if you like, and then you'd have the
Yeah.
other one that would be a political one. And so on the other side of the counter, I can remember people like yourself coming in from time to time when they knew there was a big celebrity funeral or a famous singer's funeral. And there were so many places you could hide. The loos, the gents' loo, the ladies' loo. But very
Yeah.
often they would come in and they would pose as the driver. I'm the
Really
driver. I'm the funeral director's driver. That was the big one.
smart.
So
Smart.
they
I should have just
weren't,
rented a hearse. I could have pulled right up and taken the body and taken photographs, brought him back.
you also
You know,
took,
I want to make it clear. I mean, I do know that I'm being irreverent. I would be horrified if these reporters did to me what I did to them. I mean, mourning a loved one's a very personal thing, a painful thing. And if someone came in and crashed my grandmother's funeral, I'd punch him in the face. But they were quite gracious to me. And the story I really, my favorite crashing a funeral story, we all have our favorite crashing a funeral story, but mine is Dean Martin, the legendary actor and singer, right? And
yes.
so he was to be his funeral was taking place at a very small cemetery that's loaded with celebrities. Marilyn Monroe is there, and Hugh
Yes.
Hefner, the Gabor sisters, everyone gets buried there. And so I wanted to be there for the little chapel memorial service. And so I got there early with some flowers, pretending to be a mourner at one of the graves. But it was a VIP reception, so they clear the cemetery. And I'm like, oh no, what do I do now? And the cemetery was surrounded by a big cement wall. And so I was walking around the wall, and I noticed that one of the homes behind the wall, they had a tree. The neighbor had a tree with a branch that extended over the wall right against the chapel. And so the photographer and I rented the tree for a few hours, and we climbed up there and waited. And honest, Miriam, the mourners started to come in one by one, legendary people, all signing the guest book. And I could see every person who was there. And then it got dark. The photographer left because he couldn't take any more pictures, but I stayed up there. And one of the most amazing things was I got to hear Rosemary Clooney, a legend who also was George Clooney's aunt,
Yes.
singing That's Amore up there in the clouds, just me in a tree with Dean and all of his famous friends down there. I still can't believe it all happened. It was very strange to
Oh,
revisit
I
these stories and think,
know.
God, you actually did that?
Well, I
I
was a
hope people won't be
professional.
horrified.
I was a professional jazz singer for many years, and of course, that was in the repertoire. That was
Oh,
there. Absolutely.
can we hear a little?
Oh, well, let me see. When the moon. Would you join me?
When the moon hits your eye like a big
Pizza
pizza
pie,
pie,
that's
that's amore.
amore. Zoom will unfortunately knock our top notes out, but that's you
We need a
couldn't
conductor to help us.
you wouldn't have anybody sing that song as wonderful as Dean Martin, but I tell you,
Oh,
Rosemary Clooney, she was the ideal person to have do it.
it was pretty amazing, I gotta say. Yeah, my own little private concert under the stars.
So at what point, William, did you feel I've got to pull away from the tabloid and now move into more respected, legitimate, both writing and
Yeah.
TV journalism?
Yeah, well, one of the themes of the book is my story. So when I started out at the Enquirer, I was snooping into celebrities' private lives, exposing their secrets, and I was being very secretive of my own life. I was pretending to date girls, and I knew I was gay, but I just wasn't ready to deal with it. And my father, who had passed away, he was also a closeted gay man, and so I kind of decided to just clean up my whole life at once. I took a seminar. I actually did Tony Robbins. I did something called the Landmark Forum, and I decided to come clean. I came out of the closet. I invited my Enquirer editors and fellow reporters to this seminar to see if they would join. They didn't. The Enquirer would have ceased to exist if they'd all decided to clean up their lives. But it all went hand in hand. Like if I'm going to stop exposing celebrities' private lives, I'm going to be open about my own private life. I've got to move on from the Enquirer and try something else. And it wasn't easy. I was kind of blacklisted and tainted, but slowly I crept back into it and rebuilt a reputation.
Yeah, that is the amazing thing about the book, that how many people have managed to do that in their lives? So few, so few. And I mean, you had a lot of people that sometimes reading the stories, there could be actually quite innocuous little comments that you made that they would take a real umbrage to. I mean, it happened with Bruce Willis, it happened with Leonard Nimoy. Didn't really feel that, and also one of the stars of Lost, it was Emily who'd recently lost her husband. Actually, the story there is really quite enlightening, because I thought the question you asked her was actually quite considerate, and yet at the same time the whole interview went bottom up. People were highly offended. But it really wasn't an offensive question that you asked. You know?
Well, thank you. And to fill your viewers in, what happened was I was hired at USA Today as the celebrity reporter. There were film reporters who talked about the making of movies, talked to Spielberg. There were TV reporters who talked about the plot lines of shows. I was hired as a celebrity reporter to really talk about their personal lives. And so when celebrities sat with me, hopefully they were told by their publicists that that was the deal, that was going to come up. What was unusual about this interview was I was interviewing 4 cast members from Lost. There was Jorge Garcia, Dominic Moynihan, Naveen Andrews, and Emily Draven. And Emily is such a sweetheart. And yeah, she had just, her marriage had just ended after about 6 months. She was very, very raw. I mean, really, within the week, I think she had announced this. But good for her. She showed up to the interview. And we talked all about the plot lines, what was coming up. And then it came time for me to talk about their private lives. And I waited to speak to her last, and she saw it was coming, and she burst into tears, and she ran off, and there was just a silence afterwards. And it was interesting to hear the discussion amongst the other actors at that point. And one of them, Naveen, said, "I completely understand with her. It's completely inappropriate." Dominic Moynihan was kind of quiet. He played Charlie on the show. And
Yes.
Dominic had actually met with me. He asked to meet with me earlier, before the others arrived. And he spoke to me about his relationship with Evangeline Lilly, who he was dating at the time, who played Kate. So he kind of got that out of the way. So he wasn't exposed to that question among the others. So, you know, it's difficult. When you're doing an interview about your TV show, is it fair to be asked about your personal life? Well, I guess I think it kind of comes with the game. It's part of it.
Yeah, it
People
comes with the territory, doesn't it? Yes, I would thought so.
Yeah, and I really just asked them each very briefly, what would you like to comment, if anything, about your situation, and I moved on. But I got to say, Emily, I give her great kudos. She, through her publicist, apologized to me for reacting that way. And I said, no. If anyone knows anyone, and it's an apology, my apology to Emily. And we've become friendly since then. We've worked together on different projects, and we've talked about that, and we've moved on. And I give her tremendous credit. She's a lovely, lovely woman.
And again, you've got the Midas touch. You can do this. You seem to be able to turn these situations around, which is wonderful. I'm very interested to know, where do you think the industry is going now, particularly when it comes to people in a similar or aspiring role to the one that you've had over the years? Where's it moving now? And has Me Too played as big a part as we are being told in it?
Well, there's a lot there to that. First of all, in terms of where we're going with tabloid journalism, online has just changed everything. The news is instantaneous. A lot of the news comes right from the celebrities themselves through their social media. Before the tabloids can expose things, they expose it themselves, their way and their voice. What's interesting about the Enquirer is, when I worked for the Enquirer in the 90s, it was the #1 tabloid. It had a huge circulation. And the Enquirer now is still available. You can find it on newsstands, but very strangely, they have not updated their website in years. And here in America, there's been so much focus on the Enquirer again because of the Donald Trump lawsuit and bringing
Yes,
up the hush
yes.
money with all of that nonsense. So I would think that they
Stormy
would be kind
Daniels.
of placed to update their social media, but no, they have not updated their social media and websites since I think 4 years ago. One of their lead stories is why can't James Caan find a man, a woman? Why can't James Caan find a woman? Well, he's been dead for years. That's why he can't find a woman.
Serious
So
update
I don't
needed there.
Right. I don't know how long the tabloids will really be in existence, to be quite
Yes.
honest. And with Me Too, yeah, I think people are really they're what used to be allowed years ago is not. People are being very vocal and exposing things. They don't let it get too far. They expose it right away. And yeah, it's as we've seen, it's really it's destroyed people's careers who deserve it, and it's also destroyed some people's careers who perhaps don't deserve it.
Yes. And just from even the podcast point of view, there are lots of interviews out there. People are watching maybe more than they are reading. I know from my own perspective, prior to the pandemic, I had trained as a television presenter, but I had not really developed a respect for podcasting.
Hmm.
Now, what I find happens is that you look at the podcast now as being the least corrupt of all the different ways of interviewing, because usually the people who run them are passionate, and there's no Brian Williams shouting in your ear, you know? So if they're genuinely interested, if they really want to get behind something, and you find a good podcaster who can do that, they're being watched. And I was very
Yes.
surprised at that. And I wonder what's going to happen into the future. Are we going to see this develop further?
I don't know what's going to happen. I do, I do know that I'm hoping that my book is an example of that people can change. They can learn
Yes,
from their mistakes. And
yes,
if I were to be judged by what I was doing 30 years ago, ignoring all of the enlightenment and work I've done on myself privately,
yes.
professionally, I wouldn't be invited as a guest to your show. People would be shunning my book. The book is hopefully an example of an arc. A second chance. And I think it is unfair to judge people who they are now based on something they did in college when they were just kind of a drinking moron who had yet to experience the world. That's where I have a problem when people are canceled based on somebody they no longer are.
And the cancel culture it's still strong. It is still a problem. Perhaps this is the only way through to actually have people like yourself who have been out there, they've had very successful careers, they've done so many different things, show that we still need to do this. We still need to be forgiving. We still need to be on that journey, make
Yeah,
connections, heal.
for sure.
You talk
Can I
about
can I add?
depression. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yes. Well, I was going to ask. We'll talk about that. I was going to ask Miriam if there was anything in the book that offended you, and please be honest about that.
Anything that was offensive? No, I can't say I saw anything at all that could possibly have offended me as a reader. It seems to me that you, as an author, ran a lot of your chapters by the people that you were discussing. I don't know
Yes.
that. I think that was a very important thing to do. I can't honestly say that there'd be other people out there who would have been so considerate. So you can see the arc that you've been on. You were careful to do that. And you're also aware that just even looking at the very end of the book, you've got a really extensive, very, very good appendix. Your attention to detail in your writing,
Ah.
you can see all of that coming through. And it's kind of underpinned the fact that you value this book. This book is saying something really serious about you. In a nutshell, what you've just said, that you've been on this arc, this learning curve, and you know now who you are. You know who you are,
Well, yeah, and
and you place that up.
I thought it was fair if I'm going to kind of expose my secrets, and I wanted to make sure that people weren't going to think this was yet another rehashing of scandals. This is not
No,
a scandal book. it's not exposing if anything, it's exposing my own scandals, my own transgressions, things that I did that I'm apologizing for. And as part of that, I felt it was really only fair to alert some of these folks to see if they wanted to comment. And the way that began, I reached out to Marcia Cross from Desperate Housewives. We
Yes.
also know her from Melrose Place, and we talked about an incident when I went to her home for an interview to meet her newborn baby daughters. And that morning of the interview, I received a text message from a friend that nude photos of Marcia had leaked that morning. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I mean, this is supposed to be a very friendly, on the record interview. And I walked into her home, she made muffins. And so the whole interview, I'm thinking, do I ask this? Do I ask this? And I decided to ask it. And I think that's that Enquirer bad boy, that tabloid bad boy was still in me. I didn't need to ask it. No editor told me to ask it. It was my choice. And she told me that. She said, Will, this was your choice to ask this question. So, gosh, I don't know, 15 years later, I reached out to Marcia, and she was absolutely lovely about it. And she wrote a little commentary that's in the book that you can read, her what she remembers
Yes.
about that, her point of view about that. And that led to me reaching out to many other celebrities. Bruce Willis is one of the celebrities in the book. He can no longer sadly comment. I reached
Yes.
out to his moonlighting co-star, Sybil Shepherd, and she wrote an essay about him.
Yes.
Gosh, I reached out to Melissa Gilbert from Little House on the Prairie. I crashed her wedding. She wrote a very interesting essay on her perspective on things. So that was really one of the fun final editions, is getting to hear from them what they thought, what they remembered, and whether they forgive me or not.
And that was a wonderful device. It's so rare that you see something like that. It gives you a very round picture of what that situation in your life looked like and where you are now. And I think, again, at the end of each chapter, lesson learned. You put the lesson
Yes,
learned,
yes,
which I
yes.
think was super. That's a brilliant idea. That's a really super idea. And you
Thank
were
you.
funny. It's
Oh,
funny. The humor,
thank you. Thank
genuine
you. Thank you.
humor is really lovely.
When I was a producer for the Hallmark Channel, our executive producer always made sure there was takeaway for the audience in each segment.
Yes.
What can the viewer learn from this that can change their life? And so I guess I was inspired by that. Yes, each chapter ends with a little lesson I learned that I'm hoping people can relate to and use in their own lives.
Absolutely. And I mean, you do, as I started to say a little bit earlier, you like it's not all fun. You of course had to naturally bring up the darker side. You talked about Robin Williams and that you could see the
Mm.
despair in Robin
Mhm.
Williams, you know.
Mhm.
And I thought you put it very well, actually. If I can just talking about, it was a very desperate. Um, you said Robin Williams cloaked in disabling darkness when you met him. You felt he was cloaked in disabling darkness. I thought that was a beautiful way to put it, and very true, particularly
Mhm.
for that last show that he did with his ex co-star from Mork and Mindy. You could see it in his eyes.
I had the chance to meet Robin Williams many times, and a lot of times when I've met comedians, it's been very disappointing. The persona, how fun they are, does not always translate to who they are in real life. A lot of them are kind of haunted. Robin Williams was just a delight. Every time I met him, he was exactly who you would hope he would be. But I will say that he was never fully present. It didn't seem like he was welcoming and kind, but it did seem like he was always performing, which must have been so exhausting. And when I saw him just a few months before his death, he was doing a sitcom called The Crazy Ones with Sarah Michelle Gellar. And as you said, I'm a big fan of vintage television, and I let the producers know if they ever do an episode with Pam Dauber, who played Mindy on Mork and Mindy, I would love to be there for it. So I was invited to sit down with Robin and Pam for an exclusive one-on-one interview. And yeah, he was different. He was his same kind self, but it would seem like it was harder to make the jokes. There was just this weighted cloud over him.
Yes.
But one of the things I remember is that for those who don't remember, Mork from Ork, his character in Mork and Mindy, this was in the 70s and 80s, he always wore these rainbow suspenders.
Yes.
And I was hoping to get a photograph with Mork and Mindy, with Pam and Robin, and that photograph is in the book. And I thought it would be fun to wear the rainbow suspenders. So the night before the interview, I went to a costume store and I found a pair of rainbow suspenders, but they were children's size. And so I put them on, and my pants were just riding up. I was in such pain in my nether regions during the interview. And if I can tell this story, I'll be as clean as possible. Forgive me, I'm Catholic. You're Catholic viewers. I will do a little bit of this.
And I am too. So.
At one point, Pam Dauber mentioned the word balls. And I felt that was an opening because I just said, I got to tell you guys, mine have been killing me throughout this interview because of these suspenders. And Robin Williams glanced down and he said, well, I can certainly tell what religion you are. A line he used many times. He was using it on me. And how great to be the butt of a Robin Williams joke. What a special memory that is for me.
Exactly. That was hilarious. I loved that story. I really loved that story in the book. It was really, really a standout. One of the standout stories. You talk also about having interviewed, wasn't it Brooke Shields and Courtney Cox, who had also struggled. And then you mentioned your own struggle. I thought that was very, very open of you and really putting yourself out there. And it was a struggle that you mentioned with someone who you thought loved you as much as you loved him, and unfortunately he was not what you hoped he was. And it struck me when I was reading and listening through the pages, that this sort of thing often happens to people who are very talented, very able, not just like those stars, but like you, very able, very resilient. And it's almost like these narcissist types who come on and latch onto you. They don't have that talent. They don't have that ability. And they are attracted like a moth.
Yes.
And then you can succumb to that and be so damaged, but you have the resilience, and you had the resilience with your friends going to Fantasy Island to help, bring you out of it. I thought that was a wonderful way to end that story, actually, that Fantasy Island, your dreams can come true. You can heal. You can come back from this. It was a great way to end the story.
Well, yes, I love that too. That was one of the last things I added to the book. And my start time, and they would answer the phone when I called at 2 a.m, not feeling myself. But John took me to the location where they filmed Fantasy Island back in the 70s and 80s. And I'm not sure how big of a show Fantasy Island was, but there was a bell tower, and a diminutive actor named Hervé Villachez would climb up to the top of the tower and say, "De plane, as the plane was delivering new celebrities. De plane. And so I was looking at that, and I really did sort of feel the weight of the world start to go away at that point. And I thought about celebrities who had come to Fantasyland over the years, all the ones that I had a chance to meet. And I really just was able to see outside the immediate. I was able to see the past, how lucky I was able to see a future of brightness. And so, yes, my little visit to Fantasy Island did pull me out of a slumber. And gosh, let me see that there's more beyond this.
Yes, exactly. So we have the book coming out now. It'll be the 11th of July. Yeah. What's next then?
Well, my goodness. Well, I mentioned that I kind of gave up on my screenwriting dreams when I went into the tabloid world so many years ago. I went to USC Film School for film, so I've been putting a lot of effort into my writing, and there's been a lot of very exciting things happening that are about to happen. Too soon to talk about. but I've been able to sort of embrace my love of nostalgia in a new way. So that's one thing that's I'm excited about. And I also feel that this may be kind of a goodbye to Los Angeles. I've been here for 34 years. I've lived it all. I really no longer want to go back to what I was doing. I want to move into a new environment. And so I'm thinking that this may be kind of the ribbon that I tie onto LA and a new adventure in a new area with new people I can meet and hopefully tell their stories.
And do you feel that that could be within the United States or possibly outside the United States?
Oh, I think so. I think so. My partner now, he's Austrian, so we're certainly
Oh,
entertaining the idea. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
do
We're
you
actually
mind?
leaving.
Is it okay with you if I just share a screen on your Instagram at the moment? I would love people to see your dogs.
Oh my gosh, please, absolutely,
If
yeah.
that's okay with you, because I know
Yeah.
they are absolutely gorgeous.
Yes, yes. So the cat is Valentino. His birthday is Valentine's Day. And the tan dog is Fallon, named after the character of Fallon Carrington from Dynasty. And then the little black, the gray and black one is Trick, and I got him on Halloween. And boy, he's a troublemaker, that one.
Oh my goodness, what an absolute dote. Real beauty. They are all, I love the face on your cat. Absolutely stunning. I can imagine you writing your book with the cat sitting there at the table looking at you, saying, "Why are you writing this book?" Feed
Do you
me.
have animals, Miriam?
I have
Do you
three
have
cats and
pets?
two dogs. Yes, three cats and two dogs, and they get very jealous.
So
Any,
yes,
I
yes,
know.
they come right on your computer when they don't want you to work. They knock the pen out of your hand. They're the boss. They're the top of the food chain, as my partner says.
Absolutely. And I don't know if your partner's from Vienna. What is he from Vienna or some other area of
He's
Australia of
originally
Austria?
from Linz, but we're headed to Vienna and Salzburg, and we're going to do the Sound of Music tour.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, they're going to do the whole thing.
I can assure you Vienna is no disappointment. It is absolutely
Oh,
wonderful. I've been there a number of times and it is just stunning, particularly in the
I
winter
can't
when you've
wait.
got the ice rink outside the opera house. It's oh,
Oh,
amazing. Amazing.
I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
William Keck, thank you so much for being on Writer's Block. The book again is When You Step Upon a Star, Cringeworthy
Yes,
Confessions of a Tabloid Bad Boy. And it is out on the
Amazon.
11th of July.
Yeah. Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Kindle. Many ways to access
Kindle,
it. I hope
yes,
people enjoy it.
absolutely. And pre-sales are open as in from today, 29th of May. Thank you so much for joining us on Writer's Block. You've been a joy to have on the show.
Oh, so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the kind things you said about the book.
Wonderful. William Keck, thank you very much indeed.